Hey everybody, today I am using alcohol markers and colored pencils on top of this Manga pad paper that I found. I will try to link it if I can still find it, but I have to say I think I've owned this for 10 years at this point, and I hardly ever use this paper because it is very thin, but it works really well with alcohol markers. They blend so nicely on this. It feels like painting with butter, but then I never know what to do with the piece because it's such a thin paper, so I will glue this into my sketchbook afterwards. And today I kind of want to show you how you can turn a reference picture into something more stylized. This is a picture that I took myself when I was in California, and this I believe are the canals, the Venice canals, something like that. And I didn't pick this piece because it's the most beautiful picture that I've ever taken. Definitely not. I kind of picked this because I thought that this would be something that can be stylized a lot, because we have some greenery here, we have the water, we have some houses in the background, and right now you can see me lightly sketch. I hope that you can kind of see what I'm doing. I do not want to sketch too dark because I am going to color over this afterwards with a marker, and then of course you will see much better what I'm doing, but I feel like you can kind of see it. So I am looking at these things and I'm simplifying them a lot. The bushes, the greenery, all of that stuff. I am not drawing every single leaf on the bushes, and I'm also simplifying the palm tree a lot. And I also changed a few things. I added a lot of houses here in the background. There were a few in the picture, but I added a bunch more, and I made this cable thingy. I have no idea what this is called. I made it a little bit bigger, and I also added some clouds. I added a sun, kind of a sunset theme. I added some plants in between those pathways, and here's more houses in the background, and just added stuff that I thought would add more interest. So you don't have to completely keep with your sketch, you can change it up. And now that I'm starting to color it, you will see it come to life. And also this is where the really stylizing part happens, because I'm not looking at my reference picture at all at this point anymore. So the picture has done its job. It has given me some starting point for the composition now, and now I am just coloring with the colors that speak to me and that I want to use and that I like. I am using several types of alcohol markers here, mostly the Uhuhu pastel colors. This is not sponsored, and I have bought them with my own money. But yeah, I don't know if that would change my review that much. But honestly, I think they're not too bad. I also have Copic, so I'm using a few of those. And I have incredibly cheap alcohol markers too. And I have to admit, I do not notice a difference between any of them. The only thing is that the cheaper ones might run out more easily or become dry quicker or are not refillable. I mean, that's the price you pay or not pay when you get cheap markers. They might just not work as long. And yeah, this one, for example, here is kind of some random twin marker or something that I got at the local store. And if you see alcohol markers like that are super cheap at a local store, honestly, it might be worth getting them if you can't afford the better quality ones, because there might not be that much of a difference, honestly. And if they are dried up, you can add some clear rubbing alcohol to them and you might be able to revive them. And you can see that I kind of started with the background after I did the path, and I know I missed a tile with the path. I added that later on, and I'm coloring the sky right now. I feel like the sky, since it is a the biggest part of this. It is kind of the hardest part as well. It's hard to get these bigger areas to be very smooth with alcohol markers because they dry really quickly. You can get really smooth colors in smaller areas when you color them before the marker dries, but with bigger areas, especially when you're painting around subjects like I'm doing here with the clouds, it's a little bit harder. You might be able to see a few streaks. So I recommend working as fast as you can here. And that happens to me really regardless of the type of marker. I have to say that the paper is probably the biggest contributor to whether the markers are gonna look good or not. And this paper, like I said, it works really well, even though it is flimsy and thin, and I don't know what to do with the pieces other than gluing them into my sketchbook afterwards. But you can see I'm also coloring other stuff with purple and colors that might not usually be like that. I am coloring some of the houses. I'm using purple for that. I'm coloring orange stuff that might not be orange in real life. I'm just playing around with the colors in a way that is fun to me. And that's what I encourage you to do. Do not really stick with what reality actually looks like if you don't want to. If it's boring to you to make everything exactly the color that it might be in real life, I mean, some people really like that, but if you want to stylize stuff and turn it into your own thing, then playing around with color is definitely something that you can do. And I mean, I kind of stuck with some of the colors that are completely the way they are. I have the greenery, some of it is actually green tones, and I have the water kind of in a blue tone, and the sky also makes sense. But then here and there I'm adding little bits and pieces that are not exactly what they are, like this purple bush here. I mean, it might be blooming, there might be purple flowers in this bush, we don't know, but it has this color, and there is another purple bush over there. Also, something that I always do in my pieces is I spread around the colors that I use, especially with markers when I have a more limited color palette, because I can't really mix my colors as much. I mean, you can always layer them, but you know what I mean. I like to really spread the colors around the piece so it looks a little bit more cohesive. And I also, with the colors here, wanted to stick with a similar color scheme than with the piece that I already did on the right. That is also very stylized. The one on the right is a lot simpler than the one on the left. The one on the left has a lot more details, and you can add as many or as little details as you want. I personally find that adding more details is actually easier, because with the details you can kind of get away with more mistakes. You can kind of hide them, and it will look better more easily when you add more details. And I personally find that the more simplified the piece is, the easier it is gonna be to tell little mistakes or things that just look off, because there's not all of the details that kind of distract from it. So I picked a piece that is somewhat simple but still has enough details to kind of get away with it if it is not perfect, and if there are some things that you might not completely love about the piece, like the streakiness here and there. But honestly, we don't care that much about this, or at least I'm trying not to care too much about every single thing. There is a few things that I would have done differently about this piece looking back at it, but overall I am somewhat happy with it. I also proceeded to add more details to the piece on the right as well, as I was staring at it for a while. So I did that too, also to make them look better together, to kind of make them fit together a little bit more. And yeah, this is gonna be a sketchbook page spread. I will glue these into my sketchbook afterwards. So you can see that I'm now starting to add a little bit more dimension and shading and all of that, and again spreading around my colors all over the piece. You can see that I am now introducing a colored pencil. I really love using dark purple colors for these things because they really fit my color schemes, and they work really well for line art and also for shading. I just love using dark purple colored pencils. Those are usually the colors that I use up the quickest. So I really like them. And I am adding line art to the different sections. I am outlining the different leaves and bushes and all of the elements in the picture. And I'm using the same color to add a little bit of shading. I'm using a Prismacolor colored pencil for this. How people can pronounce this is a mystery to me. And I am constantly sharpening that one because this colored pencil is not ideal, I have to say, for line art because it is very soft, but it works really well for the shading. So yeah, it's honestly up to preference. You can use any colored pencil that you have. You can also use any other pen that you have. It doesn't even have to be a colored pencil. For this part, I personally just make sure that the color is darker than the colors that I have already drawn, obviously, so that it is actually visible when I do the line art. And also I add some shading in different areas. Also, keep in mind, obviously, the more shading and the more line art you add, the more details you also have in your piece. And that might be something that you either want or don't want, depending on where you're going with it. At this point, what I'm doing here, I'm pretty happy with. It is a little bit more detailed than the piece on the right, but it is still pretty simplified. Then in the end, I went a little bit overboard with the details, I have to say, but honestly, this is up to preference. You could also just outline the different sections that you have and the different elements in your piece and then be done with it. You don't even have to do any shading or add any details, but you can with a colored pencil. And also I started with alcohol markers, but you can start with watercolors, or I don't know if gouache and colored pencils are such a good combination. Maybe acrylic gouache because it doesn't really rub off that much. You could do that as a base and then draw with a colored pencil on top, and then you can achieve a similar style as this. You could also, of course, do whatever you want and use any material that you want, but I personally like going like this and having this approach, and this is how I stylize a lot of landscapes. But I also often do it without the line art. I just paint something just with watercolors or just with gouache. For example, I use gouache a lot. I have a similar approach to simplifying gouache landscapes, and I just usually do not do any line art with gouache, especially with traditional gouache that is water soluble. I find that the colored pencil doesn't really do well with the gouache because it has a very rough texture, and then the colored pencil kind of scratches off the paint, so it's not really what I want. So this is just something that I use when I use basically any kind of marker. When I use the Karen markers, for example, that are water soluble markers that I use a lot with water, like similar to watercolor or ink even, then I also usually do an outline either with a pen or with a colored pencil. So it also depends on the kind of first layer that I do and what I use for that first layer. You can see here, that is the part that I kind of regret doing. I mean, I'm not sure, it did add depth, but I don't know if I wanted that depth. To be honest, I added this detail to the path because I felt like it was so empty. But in hindsight, I feel like that was good because it allowed the piece to breathe a little bit and gave it a little bit of white space. So if I were to do it again, I would probably leave it as is, and I might have used maybe a gray marker to go over the yellow so it's not as loud and as bright. So yeah, I don't know. I don't absolutely hate this, what I did here, but I don't absolutely love it either. And yeah, just adding some finishing details. And now I am cutting this out to add this to my sketchbook. You can see here kind of how thin this paper is as I'm cutting it out. And I'm just gluing this in. And also, if you have super thin paper and you glue it into a sketchbook, don't use liquid glue like I did here, because that really bubbled up, like the page really warped a little bit. It's not that bad, but it could have been better, honestly. But it's not that bad. It didn't completely ruin the piece. But if I were to do this again, I would try a glue stick. But glue sticks, they don't really stick that well. They're really terrible at gluing stuff. So I don't know. Maybe I should just try different brands. I don't know. People ask me what kind of glue I use. And this is the most basic glue that you can get in Germany or Austria. This is Uhu, and I have no idea if this is an international brand. I'm pretty sure it's not. The liquid one is called Uhu Flinke Flasche, which is like swift or fast bottle. I don't know how else to translate that. And the other one is just Uhu Stick. So that's the most basic glue that we have. You can see that I'm also gluing in another page spread here. This is one that I really like. I like these autumnal colors. It's so bright and fun. And here I also did very stylized pieces. So you can see that you can do this in any kind of style. Just simplify the shapes, add some doodles, and you're good to go. If you're interested in some more creative art ideas, check out this video next.